What is up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Father Dynasty. I'm your fatherly host, Chew, here in the manhole, here to talk a little fatherhood and a little Dynasty fantasy football. On this week's episode, I was fortunate enough to sit down with a leading figure in the Dynasty fantasy football landscape in Kyle Yates. And not to be overlooked is his passion for being a husband and a father, which we dig into a lot this week. And I was very appreciative for him to come on. And before we dive into this episode, I implore you, like, subscribe, review, comment, whatever medium you're enjoying this episode. Please feel free to drop any one of those, if not all of them, that you possibly can. I really appreciate it. And if you want to stop by the website, www.fatherdynasty.com, cannot believe that wasn't taken. You can enjoy all this content and more, which includes stuff out of the merch store. And it's the real deal, let me tell you. And additional mediums you can listen to this episode: Spotify, Anchor, YouTube, and many, many more. And without further ado, here is Kyle Yates. So I've got a special guest with me today. His singing voice puts both Andy Bernard and Jean-Ralphio Saperstein to shame. But more importantly, he is a husband, a father, and a fantasy football analyst. And you can check him out on his new endeavor, the Fantasy Playbook, and on his socials at Kyle Y NFL. Kyle Yates, thank you for coming on.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. I don't know about the compliment there with Andy Bernard and Jean-Ralphio. That's a high mark to live up to. No, I'm so happy to be on and talking some football here with you.
Absolutely. And in true Father Dynasty fashion, as every guest gets their own unique keep trade cut, just as a nice little icebreaker, it is very much like the fantasy tool keep trade cut. And of course, whatever three options you get, keep the best, cut the worst, and trade second. And your three topics this week are Disney movies, Marvel villains, and TV comedies. So are you ready?
Oh man. All right, let's do it.
All right. So for the first one, and I did throwback Disney movies because the new stuff, I'm not going to get on my soapbox about it, but the old school is the way to go. So three we got here are Lion King, Toy Story, and The Mighty Ducks. What do you got?
Oh, okay. So Lion King, Toy Story, Mighty Ducks, right?
Yep.
Okay. So I'm gonna keep Mighty Ducks. That was actually, like, I grew up playing hockey, so that was my movie growing up, right? That came up right as I was growing up and playing hockey. So I'll keep that for the nostalgia. Lion King, though, man, I'm gonna cut Toy Story. I actually think the later ones are actually better than the original. So I'll cut Toy Story there. And then I guess I'm trading Lion King, which sounds just absolutely brutal. But I will keep the Mighty Ducks. I'll trade the Lion King, and I will cut Toy Story.
No, that's fair. And yeah, you are Chicago Blackhawks fan, is that correct?
Yes.
Awesome. Yeah. I can understand, being a hockey fan, the Mighty Ducks. I mean, there's only so many Disney movies that even are hockey adjacent. So, I mean, the Mighty Ducks has one heck of a series. And yeah, I only a month ago found out there was a second Lion King. I had no idea that there was a follow-up.
Oh, really? Oh, well, I mean, there's a Lion King 1.5 too. So I don't know if that is going to blow your mind there, but yeah, Lion King 1.5 too is it's pretty good.
Well, you gave me something to do after my lunch break, so
there
we
go.
All right, so second we've got Marvel villains, and I'm a comic book nerd, more so for the movies and not so much the reading, because as I joke to my wife, the only thing I read is the back of a cereal box. But everyone likes the heroes, but I'm a fan of the villains. So here I've got Venom, Loki, and Magneto. So who you keep trade cut here?
I'll cut Magneto. I will keep Loki, and I will trade Venom. I think Loki, just because it's like fresh in my mind, right, with the TV show and everything, and the spinoff. Like I'll keep Loki. I like Loki.
Yeah. What is your thoughts on? Do you like the adding Venom, getting his own standalone, and kind of adding Carnage in there? Do you kind of like that storyline, or is it more of just it's all about Spider-Man and that's just secondary?
Yeah, for me, it's all about Spider-Man. I think that Venom. I actually haven't even seen those movies, so I know. Well, I won't say that. Yeah, I think that Venom, having its own standalone, I think it was good as kind of just a tie-in, but it's more about Spider-Man.
Absolutely, and yeah, this past Halloween, my son was dressed as Spider-Man, like the 6 other kids on the street.
Right.
I had to explain to him that there was more than one costume made, of course. But I tried to explain to my wife, I was like, well, I'm either going to be Venom or Carnage. And she said to me, no, they're going to be too scared because I guess what the mask would look like. So I ended up being Lieutenant Dangle from Reno 911. So I don't know which one was more terrifying to the kids, but maybe next year I get to be Venom. So the final one here, and this might be the toughest one. So this is TV comedies, and I know you're a fan of a couple of these, and I know my number one, but I think you may have a different one here. So Friends, The Office, and Parks and Recreation.
Whew. All right. I could legitimately, these three shows, I could legitimately just sit down and watch these three shows over and over again. Like if I could just keep all of these, then I would have to trade or cut every other TV comedy, maybe outside of How I Met Your Mother, maybe Brooklyn Nine-Nine. I'd have an issue, but I think these three shows you could just sit down and watch over and over again. Okay. I'll go with actually keep Parks and Rec. That's one that I could watch over and over again and just not get sick of it. I will trade Friends and I will cut The Office. Now that, again, it's very, very difficult, but The Office, I haven't watched through The Office, I think, since I was in high school. Like I haven't watched through it. Like I've seen episodes here or there, obviously, but it's one of the shows that's like more funny for me to quote than it is to actually like watch it. And so I can still like pull up some quotes from my memory, obviously, but like, then you could talk about like Andy Bernard with the cell phone and stuff like that. Like those kind of things, those are more funny for me to remember than they are to actually sit down and watch. So yeah, it's really tough, but I will cut The Office there.
Fair enough. And yeah, it's kind of getting a little overloaded with on a Comedy Central. I know it's just kind of on a loop. They're playing The Office, so it's become like the old show, like a Seinfeld, which now is on Comedy Central. That is just perpetually on TV. But all right, so I think we're warmed up here, and we'll transition to one half of what this show is all about, which is fatherhood. And I know you've got two young boys, and one of which actually I found out was born this past November, 2 days after my son's third birthday.
Okay. And
how has the process been in terms of the second infant coming through, in terms of, has it been a lot different? Has it been more difficult? How's that been in the household?
Yeah, love this kind of conversation. So for me, the second has actually been different in a good way. With the first kid, you obviously just have no clue what exactly you are signing up for, what exactly you are to expect, what's going to happen. So I feel like with the second child, especially as, in the delivery room and everything, I was way more emotional with the second one than I was with the first one, just because like I knew what that was leading to. I knew what to expect. And so, especially with them both being boys, I think that's definitely a help too. And they are like carbon copy of each other. Like they're practically identical as far as, behavior and mannerisms and stuff like that. So yeah, I think the second kid has been different, but in a good way, as far as more recognition of like treasuring and cherishing each moment, each day with them, because I know just how quickly it can all change in the blink of an eye with now having a 3.5-year-old. So yeah, I think definitely different, but in a very, very good way.
Absolutely. And is the 3.5-year-old helpful? Kind of, sort of getting into that range of like, I'd like to help you out. I'd like to do this, do that.
He definitely is. Like he is definitely a big helper. Like the other day I asked him for a diaper while I was going to change, my younger son. And he not only brought back the diaper, but also brought back like the changing pad, it's like he recognizes and is super helpful. So yeah, he's been great.
That's awesome. And I'm sure kind of like you were talking about the different perspective on the second one versus the first one. What would you say is the most rewarding or I guess humbling thing of being a father? Has that maybe changed going from 1 to 2 or over that time?
Yeah, I think that just being able to stop, and again, like you mentioned, there's with the difference between the first one and the second one. With the first one, you're just trying to like get your feet underneath you. You're just trying to figure out what the heck you're doing with the first one. With the second one, obviously, then you're adding in the wrinkle of, okay, I have 2 kids now to take care of, which is a little bit more responsibility. But I feel like the most rewarding is to be able to like stop and just treasure each day. And then also looking back, like I highly encourage every parent who is listening to this, like to take as many pictures and videos as you can, because there are stuff that comes up on, my time hop, on Snapchat memories, whatever, of my son from 2 years ago. And I just don't even remember that specific moment. Like I have no recollection of it whatsoever, but it's a moment captured in time. of him and how rapidly he has developed and progressed since then. So yeah, it's just like being able to have a greater recognition and understanding that this is going to change immensely, right? Just even from one day to the next, as far as how fast they grow and how fast they develop. So yeah, I think that's honestly the most rewarding thing, is to be able to just now like stop and treasure each specific day.
Absolutely. And credit to my wife for, I'm terrible about remembering to take pictures. Or if it's in the moment, it's like, oh, well, this isn't the right picture to take. Like,
Right.
my hair's not this, that's the wrong side, whatever. But yeah, just the amount of stuff, like she'll just, I'm at work and she just pings me a picture and I'm like, are you kidding me? It's been 2 years. It's been,
Right.
it's great to see kind of like even just like the facial expressions, like their face, used to be, I guess, less formed, less defined. And now you can just see them smiling with teeth and all that. So
Right.
unbelievable. But so overall, what would you say, I know as you're starting your new fantasy endeavor with the fantasy playbook, what would you say is the best tip for fathers in terms of work-life balance, or kind of, certainly if you're starting something up professionally, how you kind of keep all that going and keep everyone appreciated?
Yeah, for sure. Definitely easier said than done, right? To not let other things slip, or not let, the family priority slip. But that has been something that I have made placed a huge emphasis on as I have, had kids and stepped into marriage. So I think for me, it's always been like defining the top priorities, that those are going to be my faith, my family, and then anything else with work comes after that. So with my family, like, and then trying to start up a business and run a business. And I know that, a lot of people listening, like their work is crazy, can be crazy. You can easily put in more than 40 hours a week into that. And it's like that with running a business, right? There, you could be working 24/7 and you would always have something to do. So it really is just trying to like set those boundaries, set those guidelines to really say, okay, 5 o'clock hits and I'm stepping away and I'm putting my phone on do not disturb, like that kind of thing, that level of intentionality to be able to just say, I'm stepping away, because if I don't, I'm going to be split. I'm going to have split attention, and I don't want that. Like I can always carve out time after the kids go to bed, after I spend time with my wife. I can always come back to the desk and continue working. Like I said, there's always something to do. But in that moment where you're having that split attention, that's going to be what ultimately causes some sacrifice there from your wife's perspective, from your kid's perspective. So it's really something where you have to be intentional. You have to place those boundaries and guidelines, especially if you are super busy with work. Treasure each day, right? Like your kid is never going to be 3.5 years old again. Your kid is never going to be 4 months old again, whatever the case may be. So making sure that the work opportunities will come and go. They will always come and go. However, your family is always going to be there. It's always going to have to be a priority. So that's just the main thing, is like making sure that you're setting those boundaries and guidelines, because for people, especially like myself, like we enjoy work. I enjoy working and I could do it all day long, but it's like I have to be super intentional to place those boundaries and guidelines to make sure that when I am stepping away, I'm stepping away.
Absolutely. And I certainly respect that. And I would argue, it certainly makes for maybe a better product in your work. If you're, if you feel fulfilled in those other parts of your life, when you step into work again, whether it's at night, once they're asleep or whatever, I think you go into it with maybe a clearer mind and, again, ultimately a better product.
Yeah.
And speaking of you being a father, you are now a father of the Fantasy Playbook. And I'm sure that's been no small task. I know over many years you've amassed a following to kind of maybe build to this moment. But how has that process been in starting the Fantasy Playbook? Has this been maybe something in the works for a while? I'm sure, countless late nights in terms of just making sure all your ducks are in a row and make sure it's the right thing for you?
Yeah, it definitely has not been something that I've been like premeditating on for a year now, or anything, anything close to that. Really, it's even been since the end of this past season where I started to take a look at what was going on around me and say, okay, maybe this is really the time that there's a transition happening here at the company. Maybe I need to step away and entertain the idea of starting my own thing. And so I've run my own company in the past. I was a photographer and videographer for a while. So I've run my own company and have had experience doing that. And then also, like, I have a ton of experience in video editing and graphic design. So, and as a fantasy analyst full time for another company, like, you don't get the opportunity to flex those muscles as much as you normally would like to, or normally had in the past. So all of it was kind of just appealing for me to say, like, okay, I think this is the time where things are lining up where I can step away and do this on my own. And I get to do the things that I didn't get to do day in and day out that I really enjoy. So yeah, it's been a huge undertaking for sure. Don't get me wrong, but yet at the same time, really, really rewarding, especially when I see the amount of support that has come my way. So yeah, really, really rewarding.
Absolutely. And yeah, that's a good point in terms of if it's kind of a one-man show, regardless of whatever processes and tasks you were able to get other people to do. The fact that you have that background to be able to utilize on top of that passion for fantasy, it's nice to be able to kind of keep as much of it within your own control, and certainly it's your own business. So at the end of the day, it's all on you, but that's a good thing because you make a great product. So
thanks.
So kind of taking a step back, even from the fantasy playbook and the many places that you've been, what got you into Dynasty football? Was it kind of just being in fantasy, jumping over to Dynasty? Kind of when did that happen, and what kind of caused that passion or that excitement about it?
Yeah, so for me, I didn't start playing Dynasty until I think 2017 is when I got a group of guys from college that we got together and we started our own Dynasty league. And so I haven't been playing Dynasty super long, but I've had a passion for the NFL draft going back several years before that. So it was something where it really kind of tied together, that love of the NFL draft and getting to scout these incoming players and really just kind of familiarize myself with college football and then how they translate to the NFL, where players go in the NFL draft, right? It's a ton of exciting things happening at that time of year. And then so Dynasty was the way to kind of bridge that gap, right? Where it's like, we don't have fantasy football here in this time of year, but we have Dynasty, which can really kind of fill that, not void, but like fill that love of fantasy football during this time of year. So yeah, it's only been since 2017 that I've really been playing Dynasty. And then in 2019, started writing for the Fantasy Footballers as a writer there, covering Dynasty. So yeah, it's kind of been a quick, ascension here as far as getting to talk fantasy football full time and everything, but only 2017, but absolutely love Dynasty.
And I like kind of you mentioning of getting it started with a couple of buddies from college. That's kind of even why I started this in the first place was, I mean, certainly becoming a father, it kind of changes perspective on really anything in your life. But also certainly once you get removed from school, starting families, people move, even the friends that you've known since you were very, very young. So that was a big reason for me to even start this in the first place was many friends that I have moved out of state for the most part, but as they're starting families, as I've of course started a family, Dynasty is one of those things, which I got into it, I think it was 2018. But I mean, we've had fantasy leagues that have been going for like a decade.
Right.
And it's something cool just to kind of keep everyone together. And certainly with Dynasty, the offseason is not a dull moment, as we've seen, 20 minutes ago was the Wentz trade,
right.
Just to date this recording here. But yeah, it's no shortage of things to talk about and a good reason just to be able to talk with your buddies. So talk with them and certainly hear about their families and how everyone's doing. So I will end it here with a final question for you. What are your favorite storylines, or I guess if you had to pick one for each of these two categories, one as a Bears fan this offseason and the other one being a Dynasty fantasy analyst? So what would you say with that?
Ooh, okay. Bears storyline, I think, is just going to be how does the new regime surround Justin Fields with talent, right? That's going to be the main priority here. And I think that this new regime gets it, and they understand that like your rookie quarterback is the way to succeed. And you've got a good one. You've got a really talented rookie now second year quarterback, young quarterback who can be a top tier player at the position down the road, but you need to surround him with talent. So I'm going to be interested to see who they bring in free agency, in the draft, as far as receivers. Do they bring in another complimentary running back, like the offensive line? There's a lot there. So it's just essentially, as a Bears fan, how do you build around Justin Fields? As a Dynasty manager, I'm really looking at one particular situation. That's Tampa Bay. And we've got Chris Godwin now back on the franchise tag. Mike Evans, obviously, here. So really interested to see with Tampa Bay, what do they do at the quarterback position? Because if they go into next year and they have Kyle Trask or Blaine Gabbert as the quarterback, that's not going to be great for the Dynasty outlook for Mike Evans, for Chris Godwin. But if they take a swing on one of these big, veteran quarterbacks, if they go after a Deshaun Watson, and now the veteran quarterback list is dwindling by the moment, but like if they go after Deshaun Watson and we find out that his situation is cleared, then Chris Godwin and Mike Evans take a massive bump up in the rankings, right? But if they don't, then they could be fallers by the time that we get around to August. One of these guys that it's going to depend greatly on what their ADP is, average draft position, to be able to determine if I even want to invest in them for redraft purposes in 2022. It's going to be fascinating to watch what happens here in Tampa Bay throughout the rest of the offseason.
Well, very good points. And as a current owner of both Deshaun Watson and Kyle Trask, I like the way you think. If either of them are the starters in Tampa Bay, which I'd probably more hope it'd be Watson. No offense to Kyle Trask, I think that could be a very potent offense, certainly with a healthy Godwin and so many of those weapons there. But Kyle, I sincerely appreciate you coming on, taking the time away from the family, away from the Dynasty Fantasy Football, to talk a little more family and a little more Dynasty Fantasy Football. But if you want to go ahead and maybe give a little plug for that awesome new fantasy endeavor you've got going on.
Yeah, for sure. For those who are listening, you can find me over on Twitter at Kyle Y NFL. The new venture is the Fantasy Playbook. You can find that on youtube.com/fantasy playbook or wherever you get your podcast, the Fantasy Playbook podcast. Make sure to check that out.
Awesome. I appreciate it, Kyle.
Thank you.
And that wraps it up for this week's episode of Father Dynasty. Again, I want to give a huge thanks to Kyle for taking the time to talk with me and, speaking a little fatherhood, of course, a little Dynasty Fantasy Football as well. And in a week that was rife with a lot of quarterback moves and just other moves in general before free agency even began. I know there was certainly not a lot of free time that anyone had in the Dynasty Fantasy Football landscape. So very appreciative for him to take the time and talk with me. And I look forward to hopefully doing it again. And once again, I would appreciate it if you like, subscribe, review, whatever you can do. If you're on YouTube, if you're on Spotify, if you go over to the website, you can do the same thing there. And while you're on the website, www.fatherdynasty.com, can't believe that wasn't taken. Go ahead and check out the merch store. Get a shirt if you like one. Get one for your lady. Get one for your kid. And get a mug to have that coffee every morning. And to all those Dynasty daddies out there,